Have you ever noticed how the world responds to your kindness? With silence? How the more you try to be fair, patient, and understanding, the less you're actually heard?
You were taught that being good was enough, that doing the right thing, telling the truth, giving in a little more, would eventually balance everything out. But time passed, and now, even after becoming that good person, they barely notice when you're drained. You might not even know what hurts. You just feel it, like a tiredness that doesn't come from your body, but from something deeper, your soul. An exhaustion that grows inside, from swallowing every word just to keep the peace, from forcing a smile when all you wanted was to cry, from giving more than you had just to avoid disappointing someone. You learned early that yelling was wrong, that speaking up was too much, that setting boundaries was selfish. So you silenced yourself. You adjusted to what they expected, and they called that maturity. But now, maybe you're starting to see it wasn't wisdom, it was programming. A carefully written script to turn your kindness into obedience, your sensitivity into submission, your presence into invisibility. How many times have you heard, "You're so understanding"? You're always the calm one, but behind every compliment was an unspoken demand. Stay like that. Keep disappearing. That's convenient for me. Maybe the kindness you've been carrying isn't a virtue. Maybe it's just fear wearing a noble disguise. Fear of not being loved, fear of causing discomfort, fear of showing who you really are. And the worst part? You started mistaking that fear for character, that constant surrender for empathy, that exhaustion for moral strength. But what if this idea of being good is really just a quiet form of self-destruction? Today, we're going to shatter that mirror. We'll uncover the price of keeping the world comfortable at the cost of going to war against yourself. And we'll see, through Machiavelli, yes, but also through the tired eyes of someone who's had enough, that sometimes the cruelty isn't in those who scream. It's in those who are trained to remain silent. If you're ready, the truth begins now. You grew up believing that being a good person would be enough, that kindness would bring more kindness, that patience, fairness, humility, and empathy would eventually be seen by a just world. But the years went by, and the recognition never came. Instead, you got demands, fatigue, and the hollowness of someone doing everything right, yet still feeling like something is deeply wrong, and you don't know why. The truth is, no one told you. The world doesn't reward people who try to please everyone, because trying to please everyone isn't a virtue. It's chronic self-abandonment, dressed up as moral strength. You're not respected because you're good. You're respected when your goodness has structure, when your yes comes with a boundary, and your no carries weight. But that's not what they taught you. They taught you to smile even when it hurt, to stay quiet so you wouldn't upset anyone, to give in before anyone even asked, to accept, absorb, adjust. And you did it all in the name of peace. But the peace they taught you was a velvet-lined prison, applauded, admired, and deeply abusive. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few see what you really are. Niccolo Machiavelli. That quote isn't about pretending. It's about the tragedy of becoming what others need you to be, and forgetting who you are. You were trained to absorb everyone's discomfort at the expense of your own voice. Since childhood, you heard you shouldn't react, that you needed to understand others, that it was ugly to say, "This hurts me, this bothers me, this is not fair," so you went silent. But no one told you what silence does to the soul. It builds, and one day, it screams from the inside. But by then, no one listens, because the world got used to your calm, your predictability, your quiet stability. And every time you try to break that script, to say you're tired, angry, hurt, you repress it, you judge yourself, you sabotage your own truth. You're not earning respect. You're just maintaining the image they've placed on you. And that comes at a price. Your voice, your spontaneity, your truth. You're not weak for feeling. You're wounded from never being allowed to feel fully. And no, that's not your fault. But now, it's your responsibility. Because as long as you keep trying to prove you're good, no one will ever see your strength. And this world, for better or worse, only respects what carries consequence. So now, we dive into what Machiavelli was really saying, and why maybe he wasn't defending cruelty. He was defending the freedom of the one who finally stops bowing to be accepted. Machiavelli wasn't heartless, he was disruptive. A man who saw how the game really worked, and dared to describe it without sugarcoating. He wrote, "A ruler who wants to be only good will be destroyed by those who aren't. The morality of the overly nice when blind doesn't protect, it paralyzes." And maybe that's exactly what you're living now. You're not admired for your kindness. You're being drained by it. Because kindness without boundaries doesn't inspire. It invites invasion. You could have the purest heart, but if you can't say enough, you'll be treated like a hallway, not a presence. And that's the difference between being loved and being taken seriously.
The world doesn't respect what's always available, the always agreeable, the endlessly understanding. The world respects what carries consequence, not through shouting, but through presence. A ruler must be both beast and man, wrote Machiavelli, a fox and a lion. The fox sees the traps, the lion sets the tone. You need to be both. You need the eyes to recognize emotional manipulation, and the strength to refuse bending to other people's expectations. Being the fox means knowing when to stay silent. Being the lion means never apologizing for taking up space. The fox watches, calculates, waits. The lion walks in, and everyone knows, you don't cross this one. And no, this isn't about domination. It's about clarity. It's about knowing who deserves your best and who just wants your weakness. You can still be good, but never be a pushover again. The pushover stays silent to keep the peace. The strong speaks clearly to keep their soul. The pushover keeps saying sorry for existing. The strong knows not every truth requires an explanation. And if you still feel guilty for setting boundaries, it's because you were taught to confuse love with unconditional approval. Now we're going to dismantle that myth and show why true kindness only begins when you stop shaping yourself around the fear of not being liked. You weren't born trying to please everyone. This urgency to be accepted, this fear of disappointing, this anxiety to avoid conflict, all of it was taught, conditioned, programmed into you. You might not remember the exact moment, but it happened. Maybe it was that look of disapproval when you said something honest. Maybe it was the punishment disguised as discipline just because you cried at the wrong time. Or maybe it was that subtle trap of a compliment. You're so sweet, not like the others. That was the beginning of your training. That's when you first learned, without anyone saying it, that being fully yourself was too much for the world. That expressing discomfort was labeled ungrateful. That setting boundaries was rude. So you adapted. Quietly, subtly, you began to disappear. First, it was a fake smile. Then, a forced, "I'm fine." Then, it became your way of existing. You learned to scan the room, to measure every word, to anticipate what others needed, and deliver before they even asked. They called it empathy. But underneath, it was fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of being judged, fear of being called too much, selfish, hard to love. And that fear, it dressed up as virtue. You thought you were being kind, but you were betraying yourself every single day. The problem is, the world reads you by what you show. And if all you show is endless sweetness, unlimited patience, constant availability, the world doesn't see strength.
It sees emotional weakness disguised as goodness. Have you noticed how those who set boundaries are heard, even if they aren't nice, and how you, with all your kindness, get interrupted, overlooked, drained? That's not a coincidence. It's psychological structure. The world doesn't respect what's always available. The world respects what has borders. Machiavelli knew this long before modern psychology did. He wrote, "Those who never impose consequences are never taken seriously, and those who live just to appear good will eventually lose their own voice." And don't be fooled. This is not about cruelty. It's about finally stopping the act of being harmless. Now we're going to confront the word no one likes to face: self-abandonment. Let's break it open. Let's talk about why every time you say yes when you meant no, you're not being kind, you're disappearing. And every time you disappear, a piece of your identity goes with it. But there's a way back, and it begins when you stop chasing acceptance and start building respect. You're not tired because you do too much. You're tired because you do everything silently. Tired of trying to be someone others approve of. Tired of apologizing for simply existing. Tired of smiling when deep down, all you want is to scream. And that has a name. It's not empathy. It's not humility. It's self-abandonment. You spent your whole life believing you'd be loved for being honest, loyal, fair. But somewhere deep inside, you learned the truth. You were only loved when you were convenient. Maybe it started in childhood. You realized that speaking your mind pushed people away. That feeling too much made people uncomfortable. That reacting brought punishment, guilt, shame. So you silenced yourself. You adapted. And you began to confuse love with conditional approval. That approving look became your reward. That quiet acceptance felt like safety. That act of vanishing became survival.
You weren't loved fully. You were trained to cut off pieces of yourself in exchange for belonging. And that training, it became a routine. You became an expert at sensing what others want to hear, at shrinking your voice, at fitting into the tiny space they gave you, even if that space was suffocating. And the cruelest part? You started calling this maturity. But it's not. It's refined trauma. Fear dressed as personality. Old pain in a new outfit. You told yourself that not exploding was a sign of balance, but what you call balance is just another scream, swallowed more elegantly. You think you're a kind person, but inside, you're tired of always giving in. You say you're understanding, but deep down, you wonder why no one understands you. And the world, it keeps seeing you the same way. Useful, pleasant, disposable. You became the emotional pillow for people who'd never lie next to you. You became the bridge they walk over and never stop to look down. And the worst part, you keep standing there smiling, saying, "It's fine, go ahead, I can take it." But you can't take it anymore. And that's exactly where the shift begins. Because now you know that silent pain isn't weakness. It's your real self, trying to come back. So now, let's end this video where it really begins, with the rebirth of presence. Because to be respected, you don't have to become hard. You just have to become whole. It's time to stop giving in and start existing. There comes a moment when you stop blaming the world for using you and start looking into the mirror, calmly, painfully, courageously, and ask, why did I accept so little and give so much? Why did I give myself completely to those who never stayed? You don't need to turn cold to be respected, but you do need to stop bleeding inside while smiling outside. Your kindness is a gift, but when given without boundaries, it becomes the costume of abandonment. This is where the rebuilding begins.
not with rage, but with steady silence. You don't need to explain your limits. You just need to stand in them. You don't need to beg for recognition. You need to stop asking. Respect isn't demanded with words. It's carved into the air through presence. And maybe that's the hardest step of all, to fully embody your shape, not shrinking, not overcompensating, just being whole. The world might stay the same, but the way it reacts to you changes when you stop being a resource and start being a territory. You don't need to become a tyrant, but you do need to stop being a ghost. The one who always bends to fit is never remembered for who they are, just for what they were useful for. You don't need to stop being light, but you need to stop setting others on fire while dimming yourself. You can still be good, but now, with edges, with depth, with boundaries. Compassion can heal, but it can also destroy you if you give it to those who only want to take. If you made it this far, it's because something inside you is done bowing. Maybe the courage isn't fully there yet, but the clarity, it's already awake. You can scroll away, you can close this tab, you can go back to the SAM, or you can make one decision now. One decision. You can hit subscribe and step into a space where the truth is brutal but liberating, where being awake doesn't make you weird, it makes you danger. Because here, we don't worship positivity, we eat. So yeah, you can keep playing nice. You can keep being the guy who swallows everything you see, or you can join the only channel that respects your darkness, challenge, and gives voice to what you've buried for years. Crackdown isn't faux, but if you're still watching, it's probably for you. So hit subscribe, like this video and see I'm done pretend. That's how this starts. Not with noise, but with a decision.